Hello again, Year 5. You ready for the next chapter of our book? Let's jump straight in. You'll remember last time that Tiffany was visited by the wee free men who were trying to steal her sheep and her eggs, and she managed to scare them enough that they ended up helping her around the farm. So we'll see what happens next. Let's go. Tiffany had walked along the steep track from the farm down into the village hundreds of times. It was less than half a mile long, and over the centuries carts had worn it down so that it was more like a gully in the chalk and ran like a milky stream in wet weather. She was halfway down when the susurrus started. The hedges rustled without a wind, the skylarks stopped singing, and while she hadn't really noticed their song, their silence was a shock. Nothing's louder than the end of a song that's always been there. When she looked up at the sky, it was like looking through a diamond. It sparkled, and the air went cold so quickly that it was like stepping into an icy bath. Then there was snow underfoot, snow on the hedges, and the sound of hooves. They were in the field beside her. A horse was galloping through the snow, behind the hedge that was now, suddenly, just a wall of white. The hoofbeats stopped. There was a moment of silence, and then a horse landed in the lane, skidding on the snow. It pulled itself upright, and the rider turned to face Tiffany. The rider himself couldn't face Tiffany. He had no face. He had no head to hang it on. She ran. Her boots slipped in the snow as she moved, but suddenly her mind was as cold as the ice. She had 2 legs slipping on ice. A horse had twice as many legs to slip. She'd seen horses try to tackle this hill in icy weather. She had a chance. She heard a breathy whistling noise behind her and a whinny from the horse. She risked a glance. The horse was coming after her, but slowly, half walking and half sliding, steam poured off it. About halfway down the slope, the lane passed under an arch of trees, looking like crashed clouds now under the weight of snow, and beyond them, Tiffany knew, the lane flattened out. The headless man would catch her on the flat. She didn't know what would happen after that, but she was sure it would be unpleasantly short. Flakes of snow dropped on her as she passed under the trees, and she decided to make a run for it. She might reach the village. She was good at running. But if she ever got there, then what? She'd never reach a door in time, and people would shout and run about. The dark horseman didn't look like someone who'd take much notice of that. No, she had to deal with it. If only she'd brought the frying pan. "Here, wee hag, stand at you still right now." She stared up. A tiny blue man had poked his head up out of the snow on top of the hedge. There's a headless horseman after me," she shouted. "He'll no make it, hinny. Stand still. Look him in the eye. He hasn't got any eyes. Cribbins, are you a hag or no? Look him in the eyes he hasn't got." The man disappeared in the snow. Tiffany turned around. The horseman was trotting under the trees now, the horse more certain as the ground levelled. He had a sword in his hand, and he was looking at her, with the eyes he didn't have. There was the breathy noise again, not good to hear. The little men are watching me, she thought. I can't run. Granny Aiking wouldn't have run from a thing with no head. She folded her arms and glared. The horseman stopped, as if puzzled, and then urged the horse forward. A blue and red shape, larger than the other little men, dropped out of the trees. He landed on the horse's forehead, between its eyes, and grabbed an ear in both hands. Tiffany heard the man shout, "Here's a face full of dandruff for you, you boggle, courtesy of Big Yan." And then the man hit the horse between the eyes with his head. To her amazement, the horse staggered sideways. "All right," shouted the tiny fighter. "Big toughie, is he? One more with feeling." This time the horse danced uneasily the other way. Then its back legs slid from under it, and it collapsed in the snow. The little blue men erupted from the hedge. The horseman, trying to get to his feet, disappeared under a blue and red storm of screaming creatures, and vanished. The snow vanished. The horse vanished. The blue men, for a moment, were in a pile on the hot, dusty road. One of them said, "Oh, Crivens, I kicked myself in my own head." And then they too vanished. But for a moment, Tiffany saw blue and red blurs disappearing into the hedge. Then the skylarks were back. The hedges were green and full of flowers. Not a twig was broken, not a flower disturbed. The sky was blue with no flashes of diamond. Tiffany looked down. On the toes of her boots, snow was melting. She was strangely glad about that. It meant that what had just happened was magical, not madness. Because if she closed her eyes, she could still hear the wheezy breathing of the headless man. What she needed right now was people and ordinary things happening. But more than anything else, she wanted answers. Actually, what she wanted more than anything else was not to hear the wheezy breathing when she shut her eyes. The tents had gone, except for a few pieces of broken chalk, apple cores, some stamped down grass, and, alas, a few chicken feathers. There was nothing at all to show that the teachers had ever been there. A small voice said, "Psst." She looked down. A toad crept from under a dock leaf. "Miss Dick said you'd be back," it said. "I expect there's some things you want to know, right?" "Everything," said Tiffany. "We're swamped with tiny men. I can't understand half of what they say. They keep calling me a hag." "Ah, yes," said the toad. "Now you've got the McFeagles." It snowed, then it hadn't. I was chased by a horseman with no head, and one of the... what did you say they were? McFeagles, said the toad, also known as pixies. They called themselves the Wee Free Men. Well, one of them headbutted the horse. It fell over. It was a huge horse too. "Ah, that sounds like a feagle," said the toad. "I gave them some milk and they tipped it over." "You gave the McFeagles milk?" "Well, you said they're pixies." "Not pixies, pixies. They certainly don't drink milk." "Are they from the same place as Jenny?" Tiffany demanded. "No, they're rebels," said the toad. "Rebels? Against who?" "Everyone. Anything," said the toad. "Now pick me up." "Why?" "Because there's a woman at the well over there giving you a funny look. Put me in your apron pocket, for goodness sake." Tiffany snatched up the toad and smiled at the woman. I'm making a collection of pressed toads," she said. That's nice, dear," said the woman, and hurried away. "That wasn't very funny," said the toad from her apron. "People don't listen anyway," said Tiffany. She sat down under a tree and took the toad out of her pocket. "The Feagles tried to steal some of our eggs and one of our sheep," she said, "but I got them back." "You got something back from the McFeagle?" said the toad. "Were they ill?" "No, they were a bit, well, sweet, actually. They even did the chores for me." "The Feagle did chores?" said the toad. "They never do chores. They're not helpful at all." "And then there was the headless horseman," said Tiffany. "He had no head." "Well, that's a major job qualification," said the toad. "What's going on, Toad?" said Tiffany. "Is it the Feagles who are invading?" The toad looked a bit shifty. "Miss Tick doesn't really want you to handle this," it said. "She'll be back soon, with help." Is she going to be in time?" Tiffany demanded. "I don't know. Probably. But you shouldn't. I want to know what is happening." "She's gone to get some other witches," said the toad. She doesn't think you should. You'd better tell me what you know, Toad," said Tiffany. "Miss Tick isn't here. I am." "Another world is colliding with this one," said the toad. "There, happy now? That's what Miss Tick thinks. But it's happening faster than she expected. All the monsters are coming back." "Why?" "There's no one to stop them." There was silence for a moment. "There's me," said Tiffany. And that's the end of chapter 2. Let's go straight on to chapter 3. We're now in chapter 3, chapter 4, I believe we're on now. And there's a picture of the toad from the book. Oh. Chapter 4, The Wee Free Men. Nothing happened on the way back to the farm. The sky stayed blue. None of the sheep in the home paddocks appeared to be travelling backwards very fast, and an air of hot emptiness lay over everything. Ratbag was on the path leading up to the back door, and he had something trapped in his paws. As soon as he saw Tiffany, he picked it up and exited around the corner of the house at high speed, legs spinning in the high-speed slink of a guilty cat. Tiffany was too good a shot with a clod of earth. But at least there wasn't something red and blue in his mouth. "Look at him," she said. "Great cowardly blob. I really wish I could stop him catching baby birds. It's so sad." You haven't got a hat you can wear, have you? Said the toad from her apron pocket. I hate not being able to see. They went into the dairy, which Tiffany normally had to herself for most of the day. In the bushes by the door there was a muffled conversation. It went like this. What did the wee hag say? She said she wants yon cat to stop scraffing the poor wee birdies. Is that a crevens? No problemo. Tiffany put the toad on the table as carefully as possible. What do you eat? She said. It was polite to offer guests food, she knew. I've got used to slugs and worms and stuff, said the toad. It wasn't easy. Don't worry if you don't have any. I expect you weren't expecting a toad to drop in. How about some milk? You're very kind. Tiffany fetched some and poured it into a saucer. She watched while the toad crawled in. Were you a handsome prince? She asked. Yeah, right, maybe, said the toad, dribbling milk. So why did Miss Tick put a spell on you? Her? Huh? She couldn't do that, said the toad. It's serious magic, turning someone into a toad, but leaving them thinking they're human. No, it was a fairy godmother. Never cross a woman with a star on a stick, young lady. They've got a mean streak. Why did she do it? The toad looked embarrassed. I don't know, it said. It's all a bit foggy. I just know I've been a person. At least, I think I know. It gives me the willies. Sometimes I wake up in the night and I think, was I ever really human? Or was I just a toad that got on her nerves and she made me think I was once human? That'd be real torture, right? Supposing there's nothing for me to turn back into. The toad turned worried yellow eyes on her. After all, it can't be very hard to mess with a toad's head, yeah? It must be much simpler than turning, a 160-pound man into 8 ounces of toad, yes? After all, where's the rest of the mask go? I asked myself. Is it just sort of, left over? Very worrying. I mean, I've got one or two memories of being a human, of course, but what's a memory? Just a thought in your brain. You can't be sure it's real. Honestly, on nights when I've eaten a bad slug, I wake up screaming, except all that comes out is a croak. Thank you for the milk. It was very nice. Tiffany stared in silence at the toad. You know, she said, magic is a lot more complicated than I thought. Flappity, flappity, flap, cheep, cheep. Ah, poor wee me, cheepity, cheep. Tiffany ran over to the window. There was a feagle on the path. It had made itself some crude wings out of a piece of rag and a kind of beaky cap out of straw, and was wobbling around in a circle like a wounded bird. Ah, cheepity cheep, fluttery flutter. I certainly hope there's no pussy cat around. Ah, dearie me, it yelled. And down the path, Rat Bag, arch enemy of all baby birds, slunk closer, dribbling. As Tiffany opened her mouth to yell, she leaped and landed with all he leaped and landed with all 4 feet on the little man, or at least where the little man had been, because he had somersaulted in mid-air and was now right in front of Ratbag's face, and had grabbed a cat ear with each hand. Ah, see you, pussy cat, scunner that you are, he yelled. Here's a giftie from the wee birdies, you schemy. He butted the cat hard on the nose. Ratbag spun in the air and landed on his back with his eyes crossed. He squinted in cold terror as the little man leaned down at him and shouted, Cheap! Then he levitated in the way that cats do and became a ginger streak, rocketing down the path through the open door and shooting past Tiffany to hide under the sink. The Feagle looked up, grinning, and saw Tiffany. Please don't go, she begged quickly, but he went, in a blur. Tiffany's mother was hurrying down the path. Tiffany picked up the toad and put it back in her apron pocket just in time. Where's Wentworth? Is he here? Her mother asked urgently. Did he come back? Answer me! Didn't he go up to the shearing shed with you, Mum? Said Tiffany, suddenly nervous. She could feel the panic pouring off her mother like smoke. We can't find him. There was a wild look in her mother's eyes. I only turned my back for a minute. Are you sure you haven't seen him? But he couldn't come all the way back here. Go and look in the house. Go on. Mrs. Aiking hurried away. Hastily, Tiffany put the toad on the floor and chivied him under the sink. She heard him croak, and Ratbag, mad with fear and bewilderment, came out from under the sink in a whirl of legs and rocketed out of the door. She stood up. Her first shameful thought was, He wanted to go up to watch the shearing. How could he get lost? He went with Mum and Hannah and Fastidia. And how closely would Fastidia and Hannah watch him with all those young men up there? She tried to pretend she hadn't thought that, but she was treacherously good at spotting when she was lying. That's the trouble with a brain. It thinks more than you do, and more than you sometimes want it to. But he's never interested in moving far away from people. It's half a mile up to the shearing pen, and he doesn't move that fast. After a few feet, he flops down and demands sweets. But it would be a bit more peaceful around here if he did get lost. There it went again, a nasty, shameful thought, which she tried to drown out by getting busy. But first she took some sweets out of the jar as bait, and rustled the bag as she ran room to room. She heard the boots in the yard as some of the men came down from the shearing sheds, but got on with looking under beds and in cupboards, even one so high that a toddler couldn't possibly reach them, and then looked again under beds that she'd already looked under, because it was that kind of search. It was the kind of search where you go and look in the attic even though the door's always locked. After a few minutes, there were 2 or 3 voices outside calling for Wentworth, and she heard her father say, "Try down by the river." And that meant he was frantic too, because Wentworth would never walk that far without a bribe. He was not a child who was happy away from sweets. It's your fault. The thought felt like a piece of ice in her mind. It's your fault because you didn't love him very much. He turned up and you weren't the youngest anymore, and you had to have him trailing around after you, and you kept wishing, didn't you, that he'd go away. That's not true, Tiffany whispered to herself. I quite liked him. Not very much, admittedly, not all the time. He didn't know how to play properly, and he never did what he was told. You thought it would be better if he did get lost. Anyway, she added in her head, you can't love people all the time when they have a permanently runny nose, and anyway, I wonder. I wish I could find my brother, she said aloud. This seemed to have no effect, but the house was full of people, opening and shutting doors, and calling out and getting in one another's way, and the Feagles were shy, despite many of them having faces like a hatful of knuckles. Don't wish, Miss Tickett said. Do things. She went downstairs. Even some of the women who'd been packing fleeces up at the shearing shed had come down. They were clustered around her mother, who was sitting at the table, crying. No one noticed Tiffany. That often happened. She slipped into the dairy, closed the door carefully behind her, and leaned down to peer under the sink. The door burst open again, and her father ran in. He stopped. Tiffany looked up guiltily. "He can't be under there, girl," her father said. "Well, said Tiffany. "Did you look upstairs? Even in the attic, Dad?" "Well," her father looked panicky and impatient at the same time. "Go and do something." "Yes, Dad." When the door had shut, Tiffany peered under the sink again. "Are you there, Toad?" "Very, very poor pickings under here," the Toad answered, crawling out. "You keep it very clean. Not even a spider." "This is urgent," snapped Tiffany. "My little brother has gone missing, in broad daylight, up in the downs, where you can see for miles." "Oh, croap," said the Toad. "Pardon?" said Tiffany. That was swearing in Toad," said the Toad. "Sorry, but has what's going on got something to do with magic?" said Tiffany. "It has, hasn't it?" "I hope it hasn't," said the Toad, "but I think it has." "Have those little men stolen Wentworth?" "Oh, the Feagles? They don't steal children." There was something in the way the Toad said "they don't steal." "Do you know who has taken my brother then?" Tiffany demanded. "No, but they might," said the Toad. "Look, Miss Tick told me that you were not to—" "My brother has been stolen," said Tiffany sharply. "Are you going to tell me not to do anything about it?" "No, but—" "Good. Where are the Feagles now?" "Lying low, I expect. The place is full of people searching, after all. But how can I bring them back? I need them." Miss Tick said, "How can I bring them back?" You want to bring them back then?" said the Toad, looking mournful. "Yes." "It's just that's something not many people have ever wanted to do," said the Toad. "They're not like brownies. If you get Knock McFeagles in the house, it's usually best to move away." He sighed. "Tell me, is your father a drinking man?" "He has a beer sometimes," said Tiffany. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Only beer?" "Well, I'm not supposed to know about what my father calls the special sheep liniment," said Tiffany. "Granny Aiken used to make it in the old cowshed." "Strong stuff, is it?" It dissolves spoons, said Tiffany. It's for special occasion. Father says it's not for women because it puts hair in your chest. Then if you want to be sure of finding the Knack McFeagles, go and fetch some, said the toad. It will work, believe me. 5 minutes later, Tiffany was ready. Few things are hidden from a quiet child with good eyesight, and she knew where the bottles were stored, and she had one now. The cork was hammered in over a piece of rag, but it was old, and she was able to lever it out with the tip of a knife. The fumes made her eyes water. She went to pour some of the golden brown liquid into a saucer. No, we'll be trampled to death if you do that, said the toad. Just leave the cork off. Fumes rose from the top of the bottle, wavering like air over rocks on a hot day. She felt it, a sensation in the dim, cool room of riveted attention. She sat down on a milking stool and said, All right, you can come out now. There were hundreds. They rose up from behind buckets, they lowered themselves on string from the ceiling beams, they sidled sheepishly from behind the cheese racks, they crept out from under the sink. They came out of places where you'd think a man with hair like an orange gun like an orange gun nova couldn't possibly hide. They were all about 6 inches tall and mostly coloured blue, although it was hard to know if that was the actual colour of their skins or just the dye from their tattoos, which covered every inch that wasn't covered with red hair. They wore short kilts, and some wore bits of clothing too, like skinny waistcoats. A few of them wore rabbit or rat skulls on their heads as a sort of helmet, and every single one of them carried, slung across his back, a sword nearly as big as he was. However, what Tiffany noticed more than anything else was that they were scared of her. Mostly they were looking at their own feet, which was no errand for the faint-hearted, because their feet were large, dirty, and half tied up with animal skins to make very bad shoes. None of them wanted to look her in the eye. You were the people who filled the water buckets, she said. There was a lot of foot shuffling and coughing and chorus of eyes. And the weed box. There were more eyes. Tiffany glared at them. And what about the sheep? This time they all looked down. Why did you steal the sheep? There was a lot of muttering and nudging, and then one of the tiny men removed his rabbit skull helmet and twiddled it nervously in his hands. We was hungering, mistress, he muttered, but when we kenned it was thine, we did put the beastie back in the fold. They looked so crestfallen that Tiffany took pity on them. I expect you wouldn't have stolen it if you weren't so hungry then, she said. There were several hundred astonished looks. Oh, we would, mistress, said the helmet twiddler. You would? Tiffany sounded so surprised that the twiddler looked around at his colleagues for support. They all nodded. Yes, mistress. We have to. We are famously stealing folk. Aren't we, lads? What's it we're famous for? Stealing, shouted the blue men. And what else, lad? Fighting. And what else? Drinking. And what else? There was a certain amount of thought about this, but they all reached the same conclusion. Drinking and fighting. And there was something else, muttered the twiddler. Ah, yes. Tell the hag, lads. Stealing and drinking and fighting, shouted the blue men cheerfully. Tell the wee hag who we are, lads, said the helmet twiddler. There was the scrape of many small swords being drawn and thrust into the air. Knack McFeagle, the wee free man. Nae king, nae queen, nae laird, nae master. We will nae be fooled again. Tiffany stared at them. They were all watching her to see what she was going to do next, and the longer she said nothing, the more worried they became. They lowered their swords, looking embarrassed. But we wouldn't dare deny a powerful hag, except maybe for strong drink, said the twiddler, his helmet spinning desperately in his hands and his eyes in the bottle of special sheep liniment. Well, you know, help us. Help you, said Tiffany. I want you to help me. Someone has taken my brother in broad daylight. Oh, Wally, 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 said the helmet twiddler. She's come then. She's come a-fetching. We're too late. It's the Queen. There was only one of them, said Tiffany. They mean the Queen. They mean the Queen, said the toad. The Queen of the... Hush your gob, shouted the helmet twiddler, but his voice was lost in the wails and groans of the Knack McFeagles. They were pulling at their hair and stamping on the ground and shouting, Alacadee, and Wally, 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 and the toad was arguing with the helmet twiddler, and everyone was getting louder to make themselves heard. Tiffany stood up. Everybody shut up right now, she said. Silence fell, except for a few sniffs and faint wallies from the back. We was only dreeing our weird, mistress, said the helmet twiddler, almost crouching in fear. But not in here, snapped Tiffany, shaking with anger. This is a dairy. I have to keep it clean. Dreeing your weird means facing your fate. one of them said. Cause if the Queen is here, then it means Arkilda is weakening fast, said the helmet twiddler, and we'll have none of you to look after us. To look after us, thought Tiffany. Hundreds of little men who could each win the worst broken nose contest need someone to look after them. She took a deep breath. My mother's in the house crying, she said, and I don't know how to comfort her, she added to herself. I'm no good at this sort of thing. I never know what I should be saying. Out loud, she said, and she wants him back. A lot, she added, hating to say it. He's her favourite. She pointed to the helmet twiddler, who backed away. First of all, she said, I can't help thinking of you as the helmet twiddler, so what's your name? A gasp went up from the Knack McFeagles, and Tiffany heard one of them murmur, Aye, she's the hag, sure enough. That's a hag's question. The helmet twiddler looked around at them as if seeking help. We didn't give our names, he muttered, but another Feagle, somewhere safe at the back, said, Weast, you can't refuse a hag. The little man looked up, very worried. I'm the big man of the clan, mistress, he said, and my name is, well, he swallowed. My name is Rob Anybody, Feagle, mistress, but I beg you not to use it again me. The toad was ready for this. They think names have magic in them, he murmured. They don't tell them to people, in case they are written down. Aye, and put on complicated documents, said a Feagle. And summonses and such things, said another. Or wanted posters, said another. Aye, and bills and affidavits, said another. Writs of distrainment, even. The Feagles looked down and panicked at the very thought of written down things. They think written words are even more powerful, whispered the toad. They think all writing is magic. Words worry them. See their swords? They glow blue in the presence of lawyers. All right, said Tiffany. We're getting somewhere. I promise not to write his name down. Now tell me about the Queen who's taken Wentworth. The Queen of what? Can he say it aloud, mistress? Said Rob Anybody. She hears her name, whatever it's said, and she comes a calling. Actually, that's true, said the toad. You do not want to meet her, ever. She's bad? Worst. Just call her the Queen. Aye, the Queen, said Rob Anybody. He looked at Tiffany with bright, worried eyes. You dinna ken of the Queen, and you knew the Wayne of Granny Aiken, who had these hills in her bones. You dinna ken the ways. She did not show ye the ways. You know a hag? How can this be? He has slammered Jenny green teeth and stared the heedless horseman in the eyes, and he hasn't got. And you dinna ken? Tiffany gave him a brittle smile and then whispered to the toad, Who's Ken? And what about his dinner? And what's a Wayne of Granny Aiken? As far as I can make out, said the toad. They're amazed that you don't know about the Queen and her, magical ways. What with you being a child of Granny Aiken and standing up to the monsters? Ken means no. And his dinner? Forget about the dinner for now, said the toad. They thought Granny Aiken told you her magic. Hold me up to your ear, will you? Tiffany did so, and the toad whispered, Best not to disappoint them, eh? She swallowed. But she never told me about any magic, she began, and stopped. It was true. Granny Aiken hadn't told her about any magic, but she showed people magic every day. There was a time when the Baron's champion hound was caught killing sheep. It was a hunting dog after all, but it had got out onto the downs, and because sheep run, it had chased them. The Baron knew the penalty for sheep worrying. There were laws in the chalk, so old that no one remembered who made them, and everyone knew this one. Sheep-killing dogs were killed. But this dog was worth 500 gold dollars, and so the story went, the Baron sent a servant up onto the downs to Granny's hut on wheels. She was sitting on the step, smoking her pipe, and watching the flocks. The man rode up on his horse and didn't bother to dismount. That was not a good thing to do if you wanted Granny Aiken to be your friend. Iron-shod hooves cut the turf. She didn't like that. He said, The Baron commands that you find a way to save his dog, Mrs. Aiken. In return, he will give you 100 silver dollars. Granny Aiken smiled at the horizon, puffed at her pipe for a while, and replied, A man who takes arms against the Lord, that man is hanged. A starving man who steals his lord's sheep, that man is hanged. A dog that kills sheep, That dog is put to death. Those laws are on the hills, and these hills are in my bones. What is a baron that the law be break for him?" She went back to staring at the sheep. "The baron owns this country," said the servant. "It is his law." The look Granny Aiken gave him turned the man's hair white. That was the story, anyway, but all stories about Granny Aiken had a bit of fairy tale about them. "If it is, as you say, his law, then let him break it, and see how things may be then," she said. A few hours later, the Baron sent his bailiff, who was far more important but had known Granny Aiken for longer. He said, "Mrs. Aiken, the Baron requests that you use your influence to save his dog. He will happily give you 50 gold dollars to ease the difficult situation. I am sure you can see how this will benefit everyone concerned." Granny smoked her pipe and stared at the new lambs and said, "You speak for your master. Your master speaks for his dog. Who speaks for the hills? Where is the Baron, that the law be break for him?" They said that when the Baron was told this, he went very quiet. But although he was pompous and often unreasonable and far too haughty, he was not stupid. In the evening, he walked up to the hut and sat down in the turf nearby. After a while, Granny Aiken said, "Can I help you, my lord?" "Granny Aiken, I plead for the life of my dog," said the Baron. "Bring ye siller? Bring ye gilt?" said Granny Aiken. "No silver, no gold," said the Baron. "Good. A law that is break by silver or gold is no a worthwhile law. And so, my lord?" I plead, Granny Aiken. "You tried to break the law with a word." "That's right, Granny Aiken." Granny Aiken, the story went, stared at the sunset for a while and then said, "Then be down at the little old stone barn at dawn tomorrow, and we'll see if an old dog can learn new tricks. There will be a reckoning. Good night to you." Most of the village was hanging around the old stone barn the next morning. Granny arrived with one of the smaller farm wagons. It held a ewe with her newborn lamb. She put them in the barn. Some of the men turned up with the dog. It was nervy and snappy, having spent the night chained up in a shed, and kept trying to bite the men who were holding it by 2 leather straps. It was hairy. It had fangs. The Baron rode up with the bailiff, Granny Aiken nodding at them, and opened the barn door. You're putting the dog in the barn with the sheep, Miss Aiken?" said the bailiff. Do you want to choke to death on lamb?" This didn't get much of a laugh. No one really liked the bailiff. "We shall see," said Granny. The men dragged the dog to the doorway, threw it inside the barn, and slammed the door quickly. People rushed to the little windows. There was the bleating of the lamb, a growl from the dog, and then a baa from the lamb's mother. But this wasn't the normal baa of a sheep. It had an edge to it. Something hit the door, and it bounced on its hinges. Inside the door, the dog yelped. Granny Aiken picked up Tiffany and held her up to a window. The shaken dog was trying to get to its feet, but it didn't manage it before the ewe charged again, 70 pounds of enraged sheep slamming into it like a battering ram. Granny lowered Tiffany again and lit her pipe. She puffed it peacefully at the building behind her shook, and the dog yelped and whimpered. After a couple of minutes, she nodded at the men. They opened the door. The dog came out limping on 3 legs, but it hadn't managed to get more than a few feet before the ewe shot out behind it and butted it so hard that it rolled over. It lay still. Perhaps it had learned what would happen if it tried to get up again. Granny Aiken had nodded to the men, who grabbed the sheep and dragged it back into the barn. The Baron had been watching with his mouth open. "He killed a wild boar last year," he said. "What did you do to him?" "He'll mend," said Granny Aiken, carefully ignoring the question. "'Tis most his pride that's hurt, but he won't look at a sheep again. You have my thumb on that." And she licked her right thumb and held it out. After a moment's hesitation, the Baron licked his thumb, reached down and pressed it against hers. Everyone knew what it meant. On the chalk, a thumb bargain was unbreakable. For you, at a word, the law is break," said Granny Aiken. "Will you mind that, ye who's sitting in judgment? Will you remember this day? You'll have cause to." The Baron nodded to her. "That'll do," said Granny Aiken, and their thumbs parted. Next day, the Baron technically did give Granny Aiken gold, but it was only the gold-coloured foil, an ounce of Jolly Sailor, cheap and horrible pipe tobacco that was the only one Granny Aiken would ever smoke. She was always in a bad mood if the peddlers were late and she'd run out. You couldn't bribe Granny Aching for all the gold in the world, but you could definitely attract her attention with an ounce of Jolly Sailor tobacco. Things were a lot easier after that. The bailiff was a little less unpleasant when the rents were late. The Baron was a little more polite to people, and Tiffany's father said one night after 2 beers that the Baron had been shown what happens when sheep rise up, and things might be different one day, and her mother hissed at him not to talk like that because you never knew he was listening. And one day Tiffany heard him telling her mother quietly, "'Twas an old shepherd's trick that. An old ewe will fight like a lion for her lamb. We all knew that. That was how it worked. No magic at all. But that time it had been magic, and it didn't stop being magic just because you found out how it was done." The Knack McFeagles were watching Tiffany carefully, with occasional long glances at the bottle of special sheep liniment. "I haven't even found a witch's school," she thought. "I don't know a single spell. I don't even have a pointy hat. My talents are for instinct, for making cheese, and not running around panicking when things go wrong. Oh, and I've got a toad. And I don't understand half of what these little men are saying, but they know who's taken my brother. Somehow I don't think the Baron would have a clue how to deal with this. I don't either, but I think I can be clueless in a more sensible way." I remember lots of things about Granny Aching," she said. "What do you want me to do?" "The Kelda sent us," said Rob Anybody. "She sensed the Queen coming. She kenned there was going to be trouble. She told us it's going to be bad, and find the new hag who's kin to Granny Aching. She'll ken what to do." Tiffany looked at the hundreds of expectant faces. Some of the Feagles had feathers in their hair and necklaces of mole teeth. You couldn't tell someone with half his face dyed blue and a sword as big as he was that you weren't really a witch. You couldn't disappoint someone like that. "And will you help me get my brother back?" she said. The Feagle's expression didn't change. She tried again. Can you help me steal my brother back from the Queen?" Hundreds of small yet ugly faces brightened up considerably. "Ah, now you're talking our language," said Rob Anybody. Not quite," said Tiffany. "Can you all just wait a moment? I'll just pack some things," she said, trying to sound as if she knew what she was doing. She put the cork back in the bottle of special sheep liniment. The Knack McFeagles sighed. She darted back to the kitchen, found a sack, took some bandages and ointments out of the medical box, added the bottle of special sheep liniment because her father said it always did him good, and as an afterthought added the book of Diseases of Sheep and picked up the frying pan. Both might come in useful. The little men were nowhere to be seen when she got back to the dairy. She knew she ought to tell her parents what was happening, but it wouldn't work. It would be telling stories. Anyway, with any luck, she could get Wentworth back before she was even missed. But, just in case, she kept a diary in the dairy. Cheese needed to be kept track of, and she always wrote down details of the amount of butter she'd made and how much milk she'd been using. She turned to a fresh page, picked up her pencil, and, with her tongue sticking out of the corner of her mouth, began to write. The Knack McFeagles gradually reappeared. They didn't obviously step out from behind things, and they certainly didn't pop magically into existence. They appeared in the same way that faces appear in clouds and fires. They seemed to turn up if you just looked hard enough and wanted to see them. They watched the moving pencil in awe, and she could hear them murmuring, "Look at that writing stick now, will you, Bobbin? Bobbin all along? That's hag business. Ack, she has the kenning of the writing, sure enough. But you'll no write down our names, eh, mistress? Aye, anybody can be put in prison if they have written evidence." Tiffany stopped writing and read the note, and this is that note. "Dear Mum and Dad, I have gone to look for Wentworth. I am perfectly, crossed out, probably, crossed out, quite safe. Because I am with some friends? No. Acquaintances? No. People who Granny knew. P.S. The cheeses on rack 3 will need turning tomorrow if I'm not back." Tiffany looked up at Rob Anybody, who had shinned up the table leg and was watching the pencil intently, in case it wrote something dangerous. "You could have just come and asked me right at the start," she said. "We didn't ken it was thee we were looking for, mistress. Lots of big job women walking around the farm. We didn't ken it was thee until you caught Daft Willie." It might not be," thought Tiffany. "Yes, but stealing sheep and eggs, there was no need for that," she said sternly. But they wasn't nailed down, mistress, said Rob Anybody, as if it was an excuse. You can't nail down an egg, snapped Tiffany. Ack, well, you'd have the kenning of why stuff like that, mistress, said Rob Anybody. I see he's done with the riding, so we'd best be going. You hae besom? Broomstick, murmured the toad. No, said Tiffany. The important thing about magic, she added hotly, is to know not when to not use it. Fair enough, said Rob Anybody, sliding back down the table leg. Come here, Daft Willie. One of the Feagles that looked very much like that morning's egg thief came down and stood by Rob Anybody, and they both bent over slightly. If you'd care to step on us, mistress, said Rob Anybody. Before Tiffany could open her mouth, the toad said out of the corner of its mouth, and being a toad, that means quite a lot of corner. One Feagle can lift a grown man. You couldn't squash them if you tried. I don't want to try. Tiffany very cautiously raised a big boot. Daft Willie ran underneath it, and she felt the boot being pushed upwards. She might as well have trodden on a brick. Now, the other wee booty, said Rob Anybody. I'll fall over. Nay, we're good at this. And then Tiffany was standing on two pixies. She felt them moving backwards and forwards underneath her, keeping her balanced. She felt quite secure, though. It was just like wearing really thick soles. Let's gae, said Rob Anybody down below. And don't worry about yon pussycat scrapping the wee birdies. Some of the lads are staying behind to mind things. Ratbag crept along a branch. He wasn't a cat who was good at changing the ways he thought, but he was good at finding nests. He heard the cheeping from the other end of the garden, and even from the bottom of the tree he'd been able to see 3 little yellow beaks in the nest. Now he advanced, dribbling, nearly there. 3 Knack McFeagles pulled off their straw beaks and grinned happily at him. Hello, Mr. Pussycat, said one of them. You dinna learn, do ya? Cheap! And that was the end of chapter 4, and that's where we're going to leave it for now, and we'll pick it up next time. How was that? Do you like the Knack McFeagle? It's very difficult doing multiple different accents. They're like little Scottish accents, but hopefully we'll get better at it. Okay? Hope you're still enjoying the story, guys. And I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.